figure out what was wrong. I lost 30 pounds. And at one point, as I was working towards sort of like the crowning achievement of my master's program, the recital, my voice started getting really hoarse. And that was scary. And I kept practicing because I had a ton of music to learn and I really wanted to give a great recital. And around that time, things kind of hit rock bottom health-wise, and my pituitary gland started shutting down as well. So I finally had enough symptoms to get to a specialist. And the specialist was able to say, wow, you had a weird thing that I'm going to call silent thyroiditis, and no one was able to detect it for these reasons. And by the way, it's messing with all your endocrine systems, and that's why your vocal cords have gotten kind of weird, because the chemicals and hormones related to the thyroid and pituitary gland had actually thickened the vocal folds. And so it was kind of coarse. So I had to take a break, and I took a few months off, got the right medication, started feeling a little bit better. I was able to do my recital that fall after postponing it. I finished my master's program. That was all great, but things were still a little bit weird. I was still getting my feet back on the ground. And as far as singing goes, I just said, you know what, I need to let this heal. I need to just give it a moment. I'm gonna take a few steps back, and then I might come back to it. So I wasn't committed to forging another career path yet, because that was so much a part of my identity. So I go and I start getting well, but I needed a job, because when you leave grad school, that's when you have to pay back your student loans. And that's when all of these bills that seemed sort of grown up and abstract for a long time become very real. And I always think of it as like the Indiana Jones scene where the boulder's like chasing you down the hill. That was me looking for a job. And the other thing that made things difficult at this time was the Great Recession. And a lot of people my age really struggled with this around 2009, 2010, 2011. So as I needed to find a job, I had these 2 music degrees, and jobs were disappearing. There was kind of a plague of joblessness across the country. And it was very hard for a lot of people. And because employers were struggling, they were less willing to take risks on people like me with music degrees. Whereas before the recession, it might have seemed like, oh, cool, a creative person, a musician. After the recession, it was kind of like, no risks allowed. If you don't have the experience on paper, we're not going to hire you. So I was scared. And this brings us to the next chapter. At these times in our lives, I think it's really important to pause and think about what we have to offer to society, or to be more practical, to businesses that might hire us. So what skills do we have? And this is where my brain started going back to my college years and all the experience I did have, even though it didn't seem very valuable on a resume. And I went back to that piece of writing and communicating and connecting with audiences. And I knew that for me, that was the thing that I had to offer. And so I would encourage you as well to think about, like, what are those projects that you don't have to force yourself to get done? You just kind of jump into, and you feel alive, and you might even enjoy it. And that, I would suspect, is tied in some way to maybe a gift that you have, something that you could offer. You might not even think of it now as a marketable skill or something that you might use in the business world, but those skills are needed, so you can find a way. This time was a little bit difficult because, like I said, bills to pay, student loans, no joke. And so I had a few random jobs. I worked at the store Anthropology. I worked for a year in Cleveland for this Belgian fashion designer at her boutique, which was fun, but I still wanted more. I wanted to feel like I was using my skill set and doing something meaningful. And so eventually I landed at the Governor's School, and that's why I moved down to Greenville, and with my then fiance, who conducted the orchestra here last year, if you look familiar. You might have seen it before, John Conklin. But landing at Governor's School kind of felt like coming home, and it was a way to dip my toes into this business world where you're required to have a job and make money, but still be close to the arts, which had been the strongest part of my experience. So I spent a couple of years there, and it was wonderful. And then I started thinking in terms of career, and I was like, okay, you know what? I kind of need to grow. I need to try new things and learn new skills, meet new people. So I knew that after a couple of years, my chapter at Governor's School was coming to a very heavily built on music. And people still weren't quite understanding that. And I did a lot of interviews. I interviewed with Google and Uber and this company Everlane and a lot of startups and a nonprofit in Boston. And I kept getting close, and these people would say, Lauren, we really like you and we think you might be good at this job, but that resume is lacking. So I decided, okay, how can I get savvy about this? And I searched the internet high and low, Twitter and LinkedIn, for kind of side opportunities where I could use those skills that I wanted to flex, like the writing and the communicating. And I ended up doing contract work for marketing firms and doing like ad hoc writing assignments and things like that. So employers started to pay more attention to my resume because I built it up, and it was difficult. You kind of have to burn the candle at both ends sometimes, but then it always pays off and there's a quieter spell. And so I felt like it worked out, and that time was difficult, but you know, this was always a book and quote that I went back to because it's so easy, especially if you tend to be a little bit type A or have some ambition, which a lot of artist types do. You want to know the answers and where you're going to end up and what you're going to be doing and how you're going to achieve something. And so if I could talk to that Lauren now and say, hey, you know, you can just like take a deep breath, like enjoy the year with the Belgian fashion designer. That's great fun. Like everything's going to sort itself out. But I was kind of spinning my wheels to try to arrive in some way, I suppose. And so that brings me to what I learned during this chapter, and again, about the strengths. This, you know, when things kind of are uncertain, you can return to that list of skills and strengths that you noted along the way, and you can kind of rely on those. And if you have a job that's unrelated to those, oftentimes you can find a way to squeeze them in, like offer to do a little writing on the side at the job if it's indeed writing, or you know, manage their blog or their social media accounts. So those are all things that I did to try to get where I wanted to be. The other thing, and this is huge for those of us around art, was to disassociate my self-worth from my work. And wow, because I had spent a decade wanting to sing and wanting nothing but to sing, that can be hard to sort of say, notice that, you know, this might sound obvious, but all the people in my life who care about me don't care about me because of any vocal ability or skill that I have. That is not associated with my worth as a human being. And so sometimes it's really helpful to know that. And like I said, don't wish away the process, just enjoy every step. So I did a lot of interviews, like I said, and I do not claim to have all the answers, but I do have a couple of tips that I sincerely believe might help. And this is kind of what I learned along the way. The first one is be personable. And this sounds obvious, but it can take a little bit of effort, especially if you're really nervous. But employers, even though you feel like it's all about your skills and the resume, as I said, they're also kind of feeling you out to see if they want you to be in their office space every day, to see if they want to, you know, go have lunch with you, want to get things done with you, achieve things along with you as part of a team. So it's important to, you know, show that you're able to and willing to engage in that way. And I find some really good things come out of that. The second, and I think this might be the biggest one, this is what I think really sealed the deal for me at IBM, which I considered at that point my greatest sort of professional victory. And you just have to prep questions because the interview is all about you, and they ask you a million things about what you've done and what you've worked on. But then at the end, they are going to say, do you have any questions for me? And I'm telling you, this is your moment. And if you've done a little research, you can ask some questions that go beyond what are the hours I have to work and what should I wear, and dig a little bit deeper into the mission of the company, or maybe a weird situation in town that you know they're dealing with because it relates to their work, or maybe something in that industry that has just happened, a piece of news, or it could be like the person interviewing you, if they're very active on things like LinkedIn or Twitter, you might be able to get to know their work and ask personal questions about that, and it really can be an opportunity to learn, but also to show them that you're invested in the company and you're ready to just kind of jump in and get something done, and that you cared enough to put the time into that preparation. The third thing is know your weakness, did you improve it? And if you just walk into that interview with those things in your back pocket so that no one gets a deer in the headlights look, you don't have to feel like your heart stopped for a second, like, how do I answer this? Instead, you know what you're gonna say and you can feel really good about that. And by the way, you don't always have to like air every piece of dirty laundry. There is an elegant way to talk about a failure that you had. So spend a little time thinking about that too. After I got through that period, working at governor school and looking for that side work on the internet, and I ended up working with several startups because startups are often very young and scrappy and need help. So if I was interested in a company's mission, I would reach out and offer some side work to them, and that ended up working out for me. And eventually